Good morning, everyone. Kiefer Garcia here again for the Legal Blend podcast here in Morristown, New Jersey, filming on site at the Artist Baker on 16 Catano Street in Morristown, New Jersey. So we have a special guest right in front of me. I have Michael Bolzano here from Adriatic Mediation. Michael, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of mediation, I wanted to give our viewers a little bit of history of how we got here, right?
Sure.
So Adriatic Mediation, tell me, what is it?
So we are a mediation firm wherein we will mediate any conflict, so conflict resolution. So primarily we're working with divorcing couples, all right? That's the probably most plentiful market for conflict resolution, so we do that. We'll also do workplace resolution. We'll do really any type of mediation or conflict resolution.
Okay. And how did we come about with Adriatic Mediation? Where did the name come from?
It's a great question. So we were looking for a name for a little while, and my business partner and I, we weren't really able to settle on anything that we both loved. And we've been childhood friends, right? We are high school friends, right? So we've known each other for years and years. And we were sitting down one day having a coffee, just like this. And it came up organically where our parents are from. We're both first generation Americans. My father is Italian, and Dennis's father is Croatian. And so we were talking about where our fathers grew up, and it turns out that they're right on opposite sides of the Adriatic. And so my business partner, Dennis, said Adriatic Mediation, and there it was.
Adriatic Sea.
For the Adriatic Sea, which separates my father's hometown and his hometown. So it came organically, and my business partner, Dennis, was the one who said, Adriatic Mediation's the name, let's do it.
And Adriatic Mediation started when?
So I'm practicing for 15 years,
Okay.
But I actually restarted this practice in September. So we are brand new back to the market.
September 2024.
Exactly.
So when people think about mediation, right, people think, I have to compromise, I have to give up something, right? That's what we usually hear when mediation comes about. Tell me a bit of, is that true from your perspective? Do you compromise? You always have to give something up.
I believe so, but I don't think that that's exclusive to mediation. I feel like that's the same for litigation as well, right? So realistically, in this process, it's very unlikely that you're going to get every single thing that you want. Compromise is a part of what we do here, right? Like it's, I wish we lived in a world where you're going to come out of these processes where we're getting every single thing that we want, but that's just not the reality here. So mediation, I think, is just a little bit, in many scenarios, it's a little bit more effective at highlighting, maybe not exactly what we want, but what we need, right? It's a process where it should be forward thinking. And you're going to hear me say this throughout our talk, which is like, you're looking at the future. You're trying to picture, what is my next chapter of life, right? And mediation is a process whereby you are compromising to get that next chapter for both people. And sometimes the things that you want are mutually exclusive. And in mediation, the thing that I love about mediation is that you can get creative. You can problem solve. You can try to, take half a dozen from here to give, 6 to the other part, right? So it's like trying to figure out ways to mollify both sides to get them what they need at the very least, right? Even if it's mutually exclusive to get to what they want.
So people think of divorce, conflict, I need an attorney right away.
Yeah.
Is that always the case?
No, I don't believe so. Okay. I do believe that having an attorney as part of your process is important. And at the very least, at the end of my mediations, I advise them, if they haven't engaged attorneys through the process, to have an attorney review any agreements that we've made, okay? Right. So it's important for an attorney to have their eyes on it at some point to guide you individually. But what I tell people is 98% of divorce cases ultimately settle. 98 out of 100 people will compromise at some point in this process and make an agreement with the other person. The attorneys are great. You need these people to guide you through the legal process and to give you advice as to how to approach these things and what you're entitled to. But at the same time, their role is to fight for you, is to claw every last bit of what they can for you. They're your advocate. They're your gladiator, okay? That's not my role. My role is to try to actually get an effective negotiation and settlement for you, right? And so are the attorneys who are geared up to fight the entire time, that's their posture the entire time, the most appropriate parties to then turn role and try to negotiate a settlement or a compromise? I'd say I'd offer that in most chances no, especially some attorneys.
Some attorneys.
Especially, yeah. Some attorneys are great at that aspect, and some are not, right? But you need two to tango as well, right? So So the mediator, it's a completely different role. When 98 out of 100 cases are going to settle anyway, why not have somebody involved who's going to be able to do this in a timely way and with the mindset of trying to, where I told you before, a forward-thinking mindset of getting you what you want, right? As the attorney on this side, I'm not thinking about what the other side wants. I don't care, right? As a mediator, I'm thinking about both parties, okay? So that's why I think it's appropriate in most scenarios.
Gotcha. So walk us through the first step, right? So let's say they want to ask you questions or they want to see if they want to retain your services, right?
Sure.
So they call your office and walk me through that process. If I'm a new client, do they speak to Dennis? Do they speak to you? What is that process?
So when they call in, they'll first speak to Dennis, and that'll be the initial intake just to make sure we have the baseline foundation for what mediation would be. And that ideally would be setting us up for an initial consultation whereby I will sit down with them for 30 minutes to an hour to just discuss what the process will look like. But it starts with calling Dennis just to make sure that, we're set up to do that. Sometimes people call us, they really don't even understand what mediation is, or there's a gestation period for these things as well. Sometimes they're not ready for it. Right. It's like, there's an emotional component to all of the things that we do here, right? So sometimes they're calling, it's exploratory and we're not ready for an initial consultation. So it starts with Dennis to kind of weed out those people who just aren't ready yet. And then the next step is an initial consultation with both spouses, right? You want both spouses participating because mediation is a voluntary process, right? It is not mandated or forced. So both spouses come on. I understand that I have that willingness on both sides to engage in this process. And then I'll walk them through the parameters of what that looks like, right? And many people just don't understand kind of exactly what mediation is. So I'm explaining to them what mediation is. I'm explaining what the divorce might look like for them, right? So sometimes people are very shocked about what divorce could look like, right? They're shocked that...
Definitely. All the time.
They're shocked when I tell them that, okay, if you ultimately ever want to go to a trial, it's going to take you 2 years at the bare minimum here in Morris County, right? So that's something that people don't understand. So, hand-holding them through that process of divorce. And then also finally is, showing them who I am, right? Because... finding a mediator is a personal process. Finding somebody that fits you and what you need for your family is a personal process. So making sure that I fit for you.
A lot of people ask, because we do divorce litigation, right? Yeah. So a lot of people ask, is it either or? Is it mediation or a private attorney? Can both worlds meet and work together?
I think that they absolutely should.
Okay.
I highly recommend that attorneys are involved in a divorce process, whether or not you mediate, in all circumstances. Now, there are different levels of that, okay? So sometimes I get parties that come in to mediate before they've even spoken to an attorney, right? That happens pretty frequently, okay? What are those people like? They are babes in the wilderness. They really have no idea what this is gonna look like. And what are they gonna do? They're gonna turn to me as mediator, as their guide. Now, as mediator, I'm impartial neutral. I'm not permitted to give them legal advice. I'll guide them through...
I'm sorry, Mike. Can you say that one more time? Because I think that's crucial. You're not permitted to do what?
I am not permitted to give legal advice.
Wow.
Legal advice is meant to be from an attorney representing an individual. That is the capacity where someone can give legal advice.
And I'm sorry to cut in again, but what happens if... I'm sure clients ask you, but Mike, you're an attorney. Why can't you give me advice?
Because as mediator, that's not my role. By giving one party advice, I'm taking myself out of the role of impartial neutral, which is where I need to sit to be effective for an actual mediation process, okay? Let me give you an example. Okay. So we're sitting down and I have both parties sitting here and we're in the beginning stages of mediation and they're living together. But it's difficult, right? And there's a lot of conflict as a result. That's a very normal scenario. Right. So one party will say to me, I really would like to leave the marital home, but I'm not sure if it's gonna compromise my interest in the house later on if we're not successful in a mediation. What should I do?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it seems like something, now I have an idea what you can do, right? But if I tell this party, one party, if they should or should not leave the house, right? I am actually being partial for them. I'm giving them legal advice. I'm telling them what they should do. That could compromise the interest of the other party. Now, if you're the other party, how do you feel about that? Now, being an effective mediator is built on trust. Both these parties need to trust that I'm doing in both of their best interest. Okay. And if I'm guiding one person to do one thing, it's very easy that the other person will feel like I have become partial and no longer am compromised essentially in my work.
It makes total sense, right? And before I forget, because I think a lot of people who knew I was going to do this podcast with you today, I don't want to forget. So I'm going to ask you this right off the cuff.
Please.
What is the number one reason that you see in your practice of couples getting divorced?
That's a great question. I feel like the number one reason is life is really difficult.
Yeah.
And I feel like we come into marriage, maybe it's mindset. You're gonna hear me talk about mindset a lot today, right? You go into marriage maybe not with the mindset that it's work, right? And you have to work at it, right? And it's like, and work means sometimes it's good times and sometimes it's bad times, right? And when you get to the bad times, that's the hardest work, right? And so I feel like as a society, we've gotten, our attention spans have shrunk pretty significantly.
100%.
And that includes for relationships as well, right? Which is like, well, now the grass is always greener someplace else because you see the other grass, right?
Yes.
And so to me, that's what it is. It's like, it's so easy now to compare. It's so easy now to feel like, oh, other people have this. I should have this. I deserve this. Rather than maybe what is more appropriate is, putting more work into where you are, right?
Would you say along those lines then it's infidelity?
Infidelity happens frequently because of this, right? Once you start to disassociate yourself, this is not working for me, I'm not getting what I need, right? It's easy at that point to be like, well, I might as well go someplace else.
Right.
But I don't think that infidelity is the root cause necessarily. I think the root cause might be, just the inability to have that stable connection over time that causes you to look other ways because you don't have that same stickiness, that same connection any longer. Okay. That's how I see it.
Gotcha. And then I'm sure you don't have just one profile of couples coming to you, right? You might have one spouse being engaged in mediation, the other one doesn't want to, but they're just calling you because they feel they have to. Are there different forms of mediation that you use in your day-to-day?
Absolutely. Yes. In different forms too, right? There's the temporal aspect, right? So I will have a couple who wants to really get through it, right? They really want to bang it out and they'll do 2-3 sessions in a week, 2 hours a piece or more, and really trying to get it done quickly, okay? And then I'll have other couples who will string it out. They'll do 1-2 hour session 1 month, maybe a month and a half later I'll get a call and then we'll schedule again. I find those to be a little bit more difficult because you're kind of relitigating some of the things you had done previously, in your next sessions because you forget, right? It's natural for us to forget. So that's one way you see differences in kind of how people approach it. Another thing is like, our mindsets or personalities in mediation. Some people come in very aggressive and they think that they really, really need for certain things, the squeaky wheel, right?
Yes.
And then you have other people who, are so emotional about this process. It has affected them so greatly and so deeply that they've almost let go of the rope, right? So you hear things like, it's okay, whatever they want, I'm fine with it, don't worry, it's okay, whatever they want. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, that's not maybe the best way either, right? So as a mediator, that puts me in a little bit of a difficult position, right? Because I'm supposed to be impartial neutral, okay? However, when you have one party who's really aggressive about what they want, and another party who's letting go about everything, is it more ethical for me to be completely impartial and allow that to happen?
Right.
Or is it more ethical for me to push the scales a little bit to help this party who very likely will regret not sticking up for themselves more in this process, right? So, who I have to be as mediator will change. It'll evolve based on who I'm dealing with. If I'm dealing with a really difficult person or a really easy person, that changes how I approach it.
That makes sense. It makes sense. And another thing that, again, I've had so many questions that they told me, ask Mike to make sure we cover all of them. Would you say, in general, are males or females more open to mediation? Is it the male or the female that usually says, yay, I want mediation, right?
So that's a great question. It's one that's a little touchy because in some ways we want to act like we're not in a gendered world, but this world is very much gendered, right? There is a gender component to what we do. Right. And I'm very, very aware of that. So far, in my personal, I'm not saying that this is...
Right, in your practice.
In my practice, my observation is that the women have been a little bit more mediation minded. Okay. I'm not saying that that's overall, but for me personally, that's kind of what I've seen so far. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, to tell you the truth. Yeah. But I found that I'm getting more initial consultations where the woman reaches out first and then tells me, I'm trying to get my husband on board. give me a week or two. And then I get that phone call, like, he's on board. Can you schedule us for tomorrow? Well, it's still hot, right?
I hear you. So, same thing, right? Usually the woman in our practice reaches out and says, hey, I want to initiate this divorce, right? I think, I don't know, I'm talking from my perspective as a guy. Sometimes it takes us a while to get around to initiating something.
Yeah.
And again, there's different guys out there, but from our practice, that's what we see as well.
Yeah.
Now, is it more costly in your eyes to mediate or to litigate?
I think certainly litigate. Absolutely.
Why so? Why?
Because the process by necessity is much longer.
Okay.
And when you're dealing in a world where you're paying hourly for attorneys or mediators, okay, the length of the process matters, right? So as I alluded to previously in our conversation, a trial in Morris County will take you bare minimum 2 years to get on the docket for the trial schedule, okay? So that's 2 years of litigation, right? How many hours are you spending in that time to get to that? Discovery alone, right? Discovery alone, depositions. Think about how much time that takes. These are items that I don't necessarily need to do in mediation, okay? And when you ask about do I change my style based on who I'm dealing with? So, some couples, they want to get in the weeds. They'll give me every piece of financial information they've ever had in their entire lives for me to pour through. Other couples will say, I don't want you to look at my finances. We can talk about it. You can make an agreement based on the generalities of what we want to accomplish. Yeah. But I don't want you looking through my W-2s from 3 years ago. Okay. I'm like, okay. I have couples like that all the time. Now I tell them, I don't know, I'm not sure that this serves you, right? I don't know that this is the best thing for you, but ultimately if they're unwilling to do so, right, sometimes I will accommodate that if both parties agree, right? And they're okay with doing that, right? So I'll change my style that way. So so it really depends.
And when is the right time to think about mediation? And is there ever a wrong time?
That's a great question. Well, I'll answer the second question first. There's never a wrong time. Okay. There's never a wrong time because you're a year and a half into a litigation, right? You're a year and a half into a litigation. You still have a long ways to go, right? A trial is the most time-consuming, stressful part of everything, which is why you see so many agreements on the courthouse steps, because nobody wants it. Nobody wants to do a trial. Yeah. So, except maybe the attorneys.
Sometimes we don't even want to.
Yeah,
Doesn't make sense sometimes. That's the truth.
Exactly, right? So the first question is, there's never any end date. You can always mediate. It's always effective to me, okay? The earliest date, I happen to believe that the best way to go through a divorce, if it's possible, there are a percentage of people that you have to begin from a fighting posture, from like an aggressive fighting posture. That's just the way it is. Domestic violence, hidden assets, things like this require you to come in an aggressive fighting stance. I get that. But in most divorce scenarios, for me, the best way to go about it is to engage first with a mediator that fits your family. So you engage with the mediator first, and then have that mediator give you suggestions for attorneys who are collaborative-minded, settlement-minded, and who work well together. And that way, you almost have like a team of people. You're each represented by an attorney, but you have a mediator whose role is to negotiate this for you, and you go into it all together with a goal, right? You're going into it with a goal of trying to make this as fast as possible, but not rushing, right? Okay. You want to go fast. You don't want to expend these people's money or time, but at the same time, you're making decisions that will have long-standing consequences, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? So it's like, take your time enough that you're not making mistakes, right? But, by doing it that way, I feel like it's the most effective. Everybody's getting what they need. They're getting the legal guidance that they deserve and the ability to understand what are my worst case scenarios, which I can't tell them, okay? And the comfortability, because many people are feeling very scared in this scenario, okay? And so, but at the same time, you're also going into it with the mindset of like forward thinking. We're trying to make this work for everybody. We're trying to do what's best for everybody.
And I think you hit on a point that's very important to highlight, right? We're talking about traditional, if you want to call it traditional, situations where husband and wife can somewhat talk and communicate. Yeah. Let's talk about a couple who says, well, I like Mike from this episode. Maybe I do want to give him a call, but we have a restraining order in place, domestic violence, right? Can you set up a virtual mediation with them if they have a restraining order? How does it go about if they want to do in person with you, but how do you make that work in your office if they both cannot speak to each other or see each other?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. That does happen, and now it's a little bit easier because so many mediations are held virtually now. The vast majority of people want to mediate virtually. So that makes it easier to separate in space at the very least. But I do find that there are some couples that it's impossible to hold sessions where all of us are together the whole time. Just because there's so much conflict at every moment that it just really interrupts any type of flow we try to get to any type of issue. And the sniping in any sentence that you say, no matter how innocuous, right, will get turned into a jab, right?
Yes.
So, and that kind of throws the process off. So in those scenarios, what I'll do is I'll do heavy caucus. And caucus is referring to basically me taking each party individually and talking to them separately, right? Okay. So that's me caucusing with each party. So
And
I'll take them separately.
and virtually, how does that work?
So virtually, I'll create breakout rooms.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'll create a breakout room virtually. I'll put each one of them in a breakout room, and then I'll spend equal time. Well, I try to spend equal time. Sometimes that's a problem, right? If I spend a little bit more time with one person because they need it, rather than another person, I might have to explain myself. Don't worry, it's not because I don't like you as much or that I'm more partial to the other person, right? But that can be more effective to do it that way. I don't prefer that. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather us together and working through problems together. But sometimes it's necessary.
And obviously, you do this day in and day out. But someone who's brand new to this is getting divorced and says, you know what, I want to try this out. What's the number one tip you would give as far as preparing to delve into mediation?
My number one tip preparing for mediation is mindset.
Okay.
To me, the problem that a lot of people have in divorce is perspective, okay? We look at divorce as an ending, a closure, right? And it is, of course, right? You're ending a chapter of your life and you're getting closure from something that hurt you in some way, okay? But you felt you needed a finality, of course. But really to me, divorce, that's a part of it. But really to me, divorce is forward thinking. It is the springboard for the next chapter of your life. All the decisions that you make in this process are going to be setting you up for where you're going to be next. So if you're going through this process of mediation, looking at the past and holding on to everything in the past, and all of your mental energy is going into the past, you're looking at it completely wrong. Because again, if you make decisions in this divorce process that you don't like, well, I'm sorry, you can't go back and unmake those decisions. And so when now you're living in your next chapter of life and you're looking back like, wow, I should have thought of this when I was going through it, when I had the opportunity, right? So, and it's a lot of it's mindset. It's because I'm holding on to something from the past rather than figuring out what I want for future, right? So to me, the best thing you can do going into mediation, come in with the mindset of like, what does my future look like? And how do I get there? That's, to me, the most important thing.
Wow. Yeah, because I think in divorce litigation, we always tell couples, there's a moment things click, right? And that's where our client understands that, okay, now we're moving on. I have to move on, right? I have to plan for the future. And I think the way you frame it is the perspective of moving on, moving forward, progress, right? So I think, yeah, that's amazing because a lot of people look at mediation as compromise. I'm giving up something. It's in the here and now, but you're saying we're preparing for the future, how we rebuild, kind of.
Exactly.
Okay.
Go into it. What's my life going to look like in a year? What do I want my life to look like in a year? 5 years, 10 years, right? These things are important. You're not going to get there probably in a year, most people, right? It takes time to rebuild. But like having that mindset of like, I can picture what I want. How do I get there, right? It'll serve you so well as you go through this.
And tell me, Mike, we're here in Morristown. Why Morristown, New Jersey? Why open up your practice here?
So I'm actually from Morris County, and so is my Dennis, my business partner. So we're from Morris County, but Morristown specifically, it's such a vibrant community here, right? It's the center of Morris County. It's a really nice town, I feel like, with a really great business community. And, Dennis has actually a large history. He had actually run for town council here many years ago, and is very involved in the community here. And so we thought it would be great, given our roots in this county and just, because we love the town, honestly, it seemed like a natural fit for us. And we're very happy that we're here.
Nice. And what does the future hold for Adriatic Mediation? What's the goal here in the next year, next few years?
So, well, the goal is, I told you we started in September again,
Yes.
restarted in September. And so the goal is to continue growing, of course, right? I'd love to build out a team and eventually, really just grow. Okay. Of course, right? Any business owner will probably tell you that.
Yeah.
But my personal goal though,
Mhm.
Kafer, is I want to be the best.
Okay.
Like I really, I love my work. I love this job. I'm this person who enjoys being in this middle of this high conflict. I really love my job. And so I think mediation's an art. I really do. And,
100%.
it takes time, practice, and ability. And I feel like my goal is I really want to be the best. I want to be the person when the judge has something on their docket for 2.5 years says, can somebody please call Mike? That's my goal.
And when people think of Adriatic Mediation, what's one thing you can tell me that they might not know about your office from their website? Something else that they can think about saying, oh, Adriatic Mediation, I remember them for this.
Maybe that I really care. I really care about this. I care about people. I like work. Give me your most difficult person. I care about working with them. I really do. I want everybody to get all the things that they want. I know that they're not going to all get them, right? But I'm going to endeavor as much as I can to get you the most you can. And I don't care how difficult you were in this process. Like I said, I love the work. I feel like we're helping people and solving problems here, right? So if the one thing you get from Adriatic is that, we really do care. We want this for you.
Beautiful. And I want the viewers to get a little bit more of a sense of who you are, right? Who they're going to encounter if they do hire you for mediation. So I'm going to give you a few questions, personal questions, rapid fire. Let me know your answers.
Sure.
Okay, ready?
Bring it on.
All right, here we go. Ready? Apple or Android?
Apple.
Why?
That's like the one area where I follow the herd. It's like iMessage. I can't, the green bubbles is too much.
Dog or cats?
Cat.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. All dog lovers do not come to Adriatic Mediation.
No. I should say both. But anyway, cut. We gotta
Cats, why? Do you have cats?
I have a cat, which is like the best cat ever.
Okay.
And I am a cat person because of the less maintenance. I'm an avid skier, so I travel a lot to ski. And so having a dog would be a little bit difficult to be able to take care of them in the same way.
Gotcha. Last song that you listen to in the car or at home?
Never Walk Alone by Blondish. Or how about this? Or She's Too Good For Me by Frank Moody.
Okay. Yeah. Last concert attended?
I saw Arcade Fire. But this is a while ago. Maybe that's not the last concert. I have kids, Kafer. I don't go to concerts anymore. I'm old now.
Arcade Fire. And for viewers out there, just so you know, Dennis is off camera, right? But Dennis is your partner in this business, yes. Right? So tell me one thing about Dennis that people should know.
Dennis is the reason that Adriatic Mediation works.
Wow. Okay.
So I do the mediations, but Dennis is the businessman, and he makes sure that things function from day to day. So honestly, this wouldn't work without him. So I'm really grateful to him.
Nice. Okay. Favorite food?
Ooh, let's just say if I was stuck in an island, I had one thing to eat. I love fried eggplant pizza. Love it. I'm a big eggplant, fresh mozzarella, and roasted red pepper sandwich. That also. Give me those two.
Wow.
So I'm not Italian at all.
Gotcha. And you grew up where?
So I grew up in Denville.
In
Morris County. Although I'm first generation American. So my father, as I mentioned, is Italian.
Right.
And my mother is Cuban.
Does habla español?
Sí, hablo español, pero como un gringo.
No, it's curious because I don't know a lot of mediators in North Jersey who speak Spanish.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I feel like the Spanish-speaking community has maybe gotten short shrift in a lot of these areas probably in the past. And I'm hopeful actually that there are more Spanish-speaking, both attorneys and mediators for the future. But I would love to serve the Spanish-speaking community.
Wow. So people who reach out to Adriatic Mediation have that option of having a Spanish-speaking mediator.
Sí, absolutamente sí.
Okay. That's a great thing to know about Adriatic Mediation. Yeah. Now, if people want to get in contact with Adriatic Mediation, what's the best way to do that?
So the best way probably would be either to email us at info@adriaticmediation.com or to call our office. And they'll get the chance to speak with Dennis and ultimately with me. Yeah.
Gotcha. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. introducing us to the Artist Baker right here in Morristown, New Jersey. Literally, if you do get interested in hiring Mike and speaking to Dennis, they're next door, kind of, right?
Yeah. Our office is right next door to here.
So you can stop by for a cup of coffee, great pastry, and give Dennis and Mike a visit. But thank you for taking the time for introducing us to this amazing coffee shop. And next time you're in Morristown, please think about Adriatic mediation, conflict resolution, and always grab a great cup of coffee here.